I'm Veronika Starr, and this is Candid Conversations. My guest today is Sierra Melcher, author of How Change Really Happens, a book about the unexpected tools of transformation. We discuss the steps, challenges, and gratifications of writing and self publishing one's own book. What does change really mean, and why we're so afraid of it? And Sierra gives us a sneak peek into her upcoming book being released on November 11th, 2020. Hope you enjoy.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us again today. I am with Sierra Melcher, who is the founder of Integral Women and the author of How Change Really Happens. Thank you so much for joining us, Sierra.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So I met Sierra through a friend of a friend who we're all in Colombia. So none of us are from here, but we're all in Colombia. A friend of mine had introduced me to you because, well, one, I wanted to, get into community here, start to create my community here in Colombia, but also because of book writing. So I've been told by many people many times that I should write a book. And I've always been like, yeah, like not going to happen. I'm not a writer, not really been interested in doing that. And then this year, the voice has been coming from within, like, you need to write a book, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I've been a bit uneasy about this. And this is how we got to know each other, because Laura was like, you got to meet Sierra. Sierra's doing all the types of things that you're doing. She's doing the circles and working with women, and she's an entrepreneur, and she's banging out books. And so you guys should speak. And so here we are finally, after a few times interacting. This is the first time we're actually going to be speaking about books. So I'm quite excited. So is How Change Really Happens your first book?
It's the first book on Amazon. There's a lot of different ways to measure first books, I think, because my next book that's coming out in November was actually not even my first book, but it was certainly the first really close attempt to writing and publishing a book. So they don't all come out in chronological order.
Right.
But it is. So I have been wanting, like you, in either internally or externally wanting to write a book. And I would say anyone who has a bunch of people telling them to write a book should not, until it's like coming from here. Because if someone said, oh, you should have a baby, you're not going to like go do this for someone else until you're like, oh, I want to do this, because it's going to be really hard. It is going to be a soul process. It is serious, deep work. Each person has their own angle on it, but you've already shared with me, like, the process of getting the written word out is a process. And so the writing process is its own spiritual arc, and the publishing process is like a learning and vulnerability and then like a whole bunch of silly logistic thing process. And so they're two parallel big things, which is why many people don't write books. Everyone wants to write a book, for the most part. Everyone I talk to wants to write a book. And so it's a big process. To answer your question straightforwardly, yes. How Change Really Happens is the first book that got from conception to physical, digital, formatted cover, blah. So this is the first one. The next one is coming shortly. But they are very much like babies. It's a life of its own. It's going to gestate. There's the birthing process. There's all the contractions, and then it lives, and it's its own creature once it's out. So
before we talk about the second book, I'd like you, would you walk me through the process of how you decided to write a book, what your first steps were, maybe some challenges that you faced, and then finally how it felt to have it come out and to like hold it in your hand?
Yeah. Great questions. So the process really started probably 16 years ago, where I sat down to write a book, and I wrote half of it and then fell in love and never finished it. Um, Started another book, and I probably had like 6 of that process of like the start but not the conclusion, because like I said, it is such a soul process. But I had done a couple of NaNoWriMo, which is this in the US, there's National Novel Writing Month is the month of November. And the challenge of the community is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And so I started that a couple of times. My computer died on the 13th one year, and various starts, like tons and tons of starts, to the point that I took another course with a woman that I love, who actually charted how to link your menstrual cycle, your cyclical nature, with the creative process, which is like probably the complete opposite of the NaNoWriMo, which is just super masculine to smash it out. If you do this many words in this many days, you'll have a novel done. And so after doing Lisa Lister's course, I wrote a book in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it was the physical manifestation of a lot of the tools that I teach in my women's circles and I teach my one-on-one clients. And it was just the collation and compilation of those tools and practices. So if you cut that part out, it was really easy, right? If you remove that from the rest of the story, it was really quick and easy, but the story needs its whole processes, right? And so I've revised that draft a couple of times, spending 9 months with the book, then being so invested in it. I took it to publishing houses, I took it to agents, I did a pre-order campaign, all the, following all the advice that people tell you about what you're supposed to do with your book, that I cared too much about it to learn how to self-publish on that book. But I was like, I've got to write a book this year. It was December 31st or January 1st, not because of the new year, but I was just like, I have got to write a book. But I don't want to learn how to publish on my baby. So how do I solve this problem? I was like, oh, well, I'll just write another book. Which I also had to set a deadline. So I just chose a date about 90 days into the future and said, I'm going to learn how to self-publish. I know how to write a book. I have an editor friend. That part I can do, but I really want to learn how to publish the book, which is the part that I felt like I didn't know how to do. And that's the process actually that opened up the questions of like, what am I going to write about? And I just started writing, and it turned out How Change Really Happens is what I wanted to write about, because underlying everything is so many people I see have a misperception about how to accomplish their goals or how to get out of their funk or and if we don't know how change really happens, then we don't know how to create it, implement it, and recognize what growth actually looks like. Growth looks like a big fat mess. So if you have a big fat mess, you are growing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That does not mean you're on the wrong path. So I really enjoyed the whole process. Well, no, this is not true. It was really uncomfortable and a massive struggle, but
a lot of learning opportunities. Which are the same. Okay. Struggle is a learning opportunity. Exactly. If you can see it for that, if you are not like resisting what it has to learn, then it is rich. It is totally fabulous. And so I'm really enjoying my own discomfort, my own total panic. The night before it came out, after spending like 90 days trying to get people to pay attention to it, I was like, oh my God, I hope nobody buys it. I don't want anyone to read it, because it's that whole vulnerable, this is the inside of my soul that I just let anybody have a bite of. And the internet can be mean, like, why would I just like throw my heart and my belly out there? But and
I released the book right as lockdown was happening here in Medellin.
Mm-hmm.
So it took 4 months for a physical copy of the book to arrive. And to answer your other question, to like, what is it like to hold a book? I that you've written, I know every inch of this, right? I wrote it a bunch of times, probably like 16 times, edited it with a friend a couple of times, formatted it. So like I've read this book over and over and over again, but then to see it and like, it's mind blowing to know something so intimately and then see it the way that you see all other books. It's a book. It's like really a book. So a couple things happened. One is I have so much respect for every book on my shelf. I see every book as someone's heart and soul and the effort of a whole community of people, because no book comes out all by yourself, even these days. And also just having this, sharing this with people, and the conversations that it sparked because of people who have read it. The feedback that I've gotten has been really inspirational. And it means something, which is just really cool. It means something to me and it means something to other people. And it's this way to interact.
It's a whole different way of connecting with people.
In a whole different way. I checked my Amazon reviews the other day, and most of the reviews are people that I've been in contact with, but a couple of them are people I've never heard of or ever met. And I'm like, oh my goodness,
exciting.
This is really cool.
Yeah.
So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you. It's a heart process, but so I could probably talk about it forever, but let's go to the next topic so that you're getting in and getting mushy and dirty in it too. I highly recommend for anyone who is willing to go be wildly uncomfortable, if they have a story to tell, to tell it and know that it's going to be messy, and know that that is exactly what you need.
Yeah, the hardest thing for me, like I was telling you, was just flow writing and stop being over analytical about everything I write, because that's what I do, you know. And if I do write anything, it's very short, it's very promotional oriented, it's marketing. And so every word counts, the order in which they're written counts, and everything. And so that's the type of writing, if I do any, that I do. So it's been really relearning the thinking process and the writing process. And it's been difficult and intimidating and incredibly vulnerable, even though no one's reading it, you know, like no one's reading it yet. Like
you're reading it.
That's
you're
it. Like
you're
writing it, you're writing it for yourself. Just don't think about who's going to read it and who's going to judge and whatever. That's not what it's about. You know, it's just write. Yeah. And I actually been quite surprised at, once I let go of that, once I just like, okay, just like let it go, don't think, just blurb, how easily some of the things came out, and actually started, I think, with the hardest part of the story. So for me, I'm working on a memoir now, because that's my journey, you know, like that's how I got to where I am today, is all the things that I've been through. And again, like you said, you know, the challenges are a growth process. And so that's a little bit of what I'm writing about, is the challenges, the abuse, the violence. So they aren't necessarily easy things to write about, but they've also allowed me to see where I am in the process of my journey. You know, of like, oh wow, I can write about that, and I feel okay about that, you know. And it's like a nice release, and it wasn't too heavy. And there's other things where I'm just like, okay, this one's going to be tough, you know. So it's been a good perspective of where I'm at with certain things that were more difficult at one part of my life, and that now I feel like I've come full circle on it. And other things where I'm like, oh, so I got a little bit of work to do on that one.
Which is a great place to be.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about, I mean, you started to talk a little bit about what change really is, but talk to me a little bit more about what that book is about. And yeah.
So for years, I've been holding women's circles, like, and I have a system that sort of fuses science and spirituality that are usually sort of considered really separate. And I consider them the two parts of the same thing. And so some of the things that I teach in my circles and I teach to my clients are basically like how to create, how to change our perception, and then how to create fulfillment. And as humans, we thrive when we are growing. However, growth leads us into the unknown, and unknown is terrifying. So we have this catch-22 sort of built in until we can say, oh, I'm uncomfortable because I'm growing. Let me go into that instead of pushing back from it. And so How Change Really Happens, I use a lot of, it's a short book, it's 2-hour read, but there's a lot of information in there. And I use a lot of references explaining things in nature, because while we think that we're different, we're not. We are part of all of the natural systems, and the laws that are true for the plant on my desk are as true for me. Seasons and cycles, constant growth, but we're using our brains trying to prevent the discomfort, yet have the result, like the positives of growing. And while we can't really do that, we can accelerate the time that we spend that's uncomfortable, and just be like, oh, I am falling apart. That's a good thing, because it means I'm moving out of an old thing that used to work that no longer works. And there's just words that we don't use accurately, like our comfort zone. You stay in your comfort zone long enough, it's really uncomfortable because you need to, it's familiar, right? This is where the words are incorrect. It's our familiar zone and not always our comfort zone. It starts as a comfort zone. It starts it with a protective shell. But if you stay in that same space too long, all of a sudden it's cramped and it's tight and it's miserable, and you need the change. But humans, and this is where we mess up, we're afraid of what is outside. So we stay consciously and actively keeping ourselves confined. And that's not cool. That's not fair. It's not natural. But we're like, oh, I don't know what the other is. So I know this discomfort. So I'm going to choose this discomfort over that discomfort. And when we can see that, there's just a couple of concepts and a couple of examples that help people really reframe their own thought processes, their own reactions to things, so that we can dive in a little bit more and get out of our discomfort zone into the unknown, which is, yes, also like, ooh, okay, but it's spacious, right? There's confining discomfort, and then there's spacious discomfort, and we are meant to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
In relationships, in careers, in our spiritual path, all of it. Like, we are just, and when we think back to the times that we were thriving, that we were flourishing, it was when we were doing new things and trying and stretching. And in memory, we're always like, oh, that was nice. No, it was terrifying. It was terrifying then, and now we know how to do it. And so we minimize how hard it was, which then when we're looking forwards and we say, well, this should be easy because I remember it being easy, it wasn't. So our whole story arc about how things happen is backwards. And if we can remember that it was hard and that it was terrifying, and that this new thing is hard and terrifying, that means it's a good thing.
Yeah, update our perspective.
Exactly, because the story of, if you're doing the right thing, it should be easy, that is that's wrong. If it's easy, it's probably too familiar, and maybe you're not growing enough.
Yeah.
One of the things I share in all of my work is it's the subtlest shifts that make the radical change.
Mm-hmm.
And so change, it's always happening. It's happening to
Always.
us, right? Whether we are choosing to grow with it or push back against it, we are still changing. And we don't have to do leaps and bounds, right? It's the small things that we do over time that really create our lives.
And is this a lot of the work that you're doing with Integral Women?
There's certainly an overlap. And so How Change Really Happens has a bunch of the basic lessons that I share in with my clients and I share in Circle. Date Yourself is the book that's coming out in November. And that's another practice written in a similar way with stories and tools and practices that the reader can actually like, oh, I'm going to walk myself through this practice. It's more about reframing and coming up with a new perspective about our relationships with ourselves. And so it is a self-love book, but I've really hesitated to use this word for so long because of how I feel about other self-love books, that they're airy, that they're fairy, that they're beautiful. But if I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do about it at the end of reading the book, then what, right? Like now I just still feel worse because I can't do the thing. And so I tried to really break it down into practical things. Write this letter, burn it, do this next thing, so that the steps are really clear. And the principle of that book really is, what if we offered ourselves the love and attention that we both give to others and really, really want from them? Because we can. It's actually very possible, more so than getting from them what we really want. We can figure out what we want, we can offer that to ourselves, and then when we get it from someone else, because we know what it is, because we're okay with communicating it, then it's great to get it from someone else, but it's not even as necessary because we've already had our own needs met.
Exactly. Yeah. And you become a lot less needy as well and dependent on the other.
Which then people want to give you more things, right? You get more because you don't need it, which is just this awesome little universal loophole. But I came to this concept through my own story of discovering that my relationship with myself, and so this is one of the main focuses I do in Integral Women, is teaching women how to have a relationship with themselves, how to sort of break this. We have this concept that the world is just out here, right? That the world is the tangible stuff, and if I do enough work, then I can get the results. But I add, and this is where the spiritual and the science come together, right? What if everything that we knew was only half of the story, and that there's a whole metaphysical, internal, energetic world, and that my relationship with myself, while no one else will ever observe it, no one else will ever go into this territory with me, it's as important as my relationships with any other person on all other people. And I started to like, well, who am I and how do I treat myself? And when I did that investigating, I was terrified because I was in a neglectful, abusive, cruel, cyclical relationship with myself. The voice, the conversations in my head were mean, judgmental. And if I had been with another person who spoke to me that way or treated me that way, I would leave. I would never say any of these things to another person, nor would I want them said to me. Meanwhile, I was living in it all the time. And you cannot break up with yourself, right? And so this process in this book, Date Yourself, is how to shift that internal relationship from being overly critical, overly judgmental, super cruel, to patient and kind, attentive and nurturing, not self-love, I'm going to get a manicure, not dealing with just this external superficial thing, but to really to open up a relationship and actually, the metaphor of dating yourself is so perfect because you need to, it's a constant process. If you date someone, you get together and then you neglect them forever, that relationship is short-lived. If you do the same thing to yourself, or like, oh, well, didn't we do something last month? Isn't that good enough? No. I want to be attended to, nourished, nurtured every day in all ways. And you can't like kick me in the stomach and then buy me flowers, and literally or metaphorically, and have it be okay, right? I can't say horrible things to myself and then buy a brownie and make it okay. That doesn't work. And so
it doesn't balance.
It does not balance. And so many people, my story is not just mine, right? I share bits and pieces of my own, but I share the stories of a bunch of other women who have very similar stories. And I think that this is super relatable.
Absolutely.
Because
I can totally relate to it. I mean, I've been through the same thing in the last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is
and
definitely.
And
relatable.
we learn how to treat ourselves from watching how people treat us. And then other people learn how to treat us by watching how we treat ourselves. And so it's this like dual infinity loop, and it's super important. But we have the capacity, we're the only ones actually who can break the cycle. And once you are in this relationship with yourself and you feel safe and you feel appreciated and you feel beautiful, then it's great when someone else can feel that way about you. But like you said, it's not essential to your survival, and you don't become dependent on someone else for that, because you've established a foundation for yourself. So the dating yourself is really a foundational practice of figuring out who the hell you are, because most of us don't know, because we're putting our attention into figuring out who we're supposed to be for others.
Exactly. Being the daughter, being the mother, being the wife, being the boss.
And we can be good at all of those things. We can be better at them. We can be more loving to others when we like, yeah, I feel good about me. Now I can just pour it on you because I don't need something back. It's not transactional. It is It is generous.
Yeah, the cup is full. When the cup is full, then there's so much more to give away than when the cup is empty and you need to get back and need to get back and need to get back.
And I was working with a cracked cup, right? Like I was just working with a sieve, right? I was just like, anything that came in, because I was like, people would say compliments and I was just like, I can't hold this. And so nothing could fill me until I built the container. So
beautiful. So where can people find this book? When does it come out? Where can they find it?
It's coming out on November 11th. It's going to be on Amazon. You can just, I'm pretty excited, and this is a fun thing. You can just put Sierra Melcher, Melcher, in Amazon, and you will see the books that I have. Because I did How Change Really Happens by myself, and then I've contributed to a bunch of other books in the last 6 or 7 months. So there's chapters about conscious parenting, and there's chapters about success through figuring out who you are. Everything that I'm writing about is related, but Amazon will be the place for this, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your advice. And it's really nice to connect with you on a different subject. And I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you. And I look forward to hearing about your first terrible draft.
Sounds good. I'll keep you posted.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you found our candid conversation interesting. I'd love to hear your takeaways, your questions or comments about anything that was shared today. Thank you again for taking the time to watch. Please share and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear more candid conversations.